So let's talk about the boomers. The boomers, they sit here. Not all boomers, okay? So let me make this perfectly clear. When I talk about the boomers, I'm not talking about every single boomer because there are some good boomers. And I'll start off by saying the boomers were very, very, very hard workers. They were very dedicated to their craft. Like they wouldn't miss a single day of work. Like this is what they banked their mentality on is never missing work. You know what I mean? Even if that meant going through like sicknesses or toughing things out. You know what I mean? Like missing family get-togethers because they couldn't miss one day of work, they provided for their families to a certain extent, but the things they provided for their families, right? Emotional. We'll get into that, but you know they provided the stuff, the things. They provided the things that you need. I mean, we need stuff, right? We need clothes, we need a roof over our head, stuff like that. You know, there's a huge war between young people and boomers right now. And I'm on the side of the young people because they are the future. Like boomers, like listen, man, you have to understand you're on your way out. You're on your way out. I look at myself, I'm like, dude, I've lived my life and I'm only middle aged. These young people are way more important than me. You know what I mean? It's just a lot of these boomers, not all boomers, they just have this narcissistic, childish mentality. Now they were hard workers. You know, the boomers were the people who were the hippies, right? They were against the establishment. And then they conformed very, very, very quickly. But they rebelled. They rebelled against their parents. But like I said, they not all, but they were the hippies. Like they came from them. So they like to say, when we talk about the cost of living and how everything's expensive, and it's really expensive to raise, like when I raise my kids in this economy, there's no way I could do what I did 10 years ago before COVID, before all the money printing. There's no way I could do what I did then now without any type of help, without some type of welfare, without some type, you know what I mean? It's just not enough. I barely make enough as it is right now, but with like high prices on everything, housing, food. I mean, for somebody like me, I felt like I've already been living this for the longest time. I've had to cut back on things, go without. I remember when I was trying to get off of the welfare, I didn't have health insurance. I don't think I had a health insurance the whole time I was on there anyway. But you know, it's cutting back. Like I don't have health insurance now. It would be nice to go to a doctor. It'd be nice to go to a dentist. I haven't been to one in a couple of years now, but I brush my teeth. I make sure I take care of my teeth. Try to be healthy. But it's like they are completely out of touch with reality. Like they think it's still the same as what they went through. And I'm not saying they didn't go through some stuff back then. They definitely went through some stuff. Like they went through like the serial killer phase. Well, I mean, we're going through the mass shooting phase, but like there was fears. They went to a draft and they had to go to Vietnam and stuff like that. They witnessed the JFK assassination. like they went through some legit stuff, and I don't think that anybody's denying that. Nobody's saying that they didn't go through anything like harsh. They didn't have it rough. They didn't overcome. But I think that people are just basically trying to say like what you went through was hard. You know, they'll say, well, I went through this and I pull myself up by the bootstraps. But if you were to do that today, it would almost be impossible. But they don't understand that. They think, oh, if you just because you have your lattes or your $6 coffees, and it's like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like somebody like me, I don't go out and eat that often. And if like, here's the thing, I mean, you kind of have to have something to look forward to, since they don't get it, because like back then there was a lot of culture, and that's what they don't understand, is like there really isn't any culture nowadays. Back then there was culture. There was popular music, that there was movies, there was stuff that people could look forward to. They could congregate, they would have fun. And here's the thing, women were still women back then, and that's what they don't get, is they were feminist or whatever, but they still wanted to have kids. They still wanted to have a family. Not to say that women don't naturally have that instinct nowadays, but like they don't really it's in them naturally, but they don't care as much. You know what I mean? They don't care about sacrificing as much for their children. Not all women, okay, but this is, if you compare the women back then to now, like there's a bigger population of women nowadays that are self-interested. You know what I mean? Women back then, they would endure really bad stuff from their husbands, like getting beaten, just to keep the family together. Women nowadays, like you can just be, you're doing everything right. Well, I'm kind of bored. I'm not happy, and then they're gone. So they just leave their men for nothing. But the problem is the other way around. It was the guys. We wonder why women are horrible nowadays. I mean, because it stems from us. It stems from guys, replacing their families with another family. It's so weird. Like, what was wrong with the family you had that you had to replace everything in that whole that whole system? You replace the mom, you replace the kids. It's so weird how the men were back then. But they had it so good. They didn't even realize how good that they had it. Like I said, they went through their struggles. I'm not saying, and I don't think that anybody's saying that they didn't go through any type of struggles. It's just like they had more community. I think that a lot of the boomers had both parents they were raised with. They had the structure, the family structure. Not to say that every environment was the greatest, but I'm just saying, like, they had both parents in the house. They had structure. When you come to the generations after the boomers, you see less structure. You see more families being separated. So it's just like they had the community back then. I thought I heard some like dripping, but I checked out the light fixture. There was no water in there. I don't know why there would be water in there anyway. Anyway, there's been no leaking. I just like it. It's like flickering or something. Kind of. Hold on a second. I guess I'll just go ahead and let some natural light in. So, like, they had more community. They had more people getting together, they could go outside and there would be people outside that they can congregate with. You know, they think like, just send your kid outside, they can go play. But who are they going to play with? Have they looked outside and see the playgrounds are completely empty? Like, there's no kids out there? You know, they don't think like that. Okay, then I'm just going to send my kid to play by themselves. No, when you send your kid outside back in the old days, there was other kids to play with in the neighborhood. There really isn't that anymore. It's a different day and age. And here's the thing too, is they say, oh, you guys have the internet, you have cell phones, you have, you know, all this stuff on demand if you want it. These TVs, these flat screen TVs, all this entertainment, which they're correct. When they say that stuff, they say that we're spoiled, right? They say that we're completely spoiled. But they don't look at themselves as being spoiled themselves. You know, like, look at what their parents went through. You know, their parents, some of them had to skip meals during the Depression. Their parents literally had nothing. And then you fast forward to when they were growing up, then they had washing machines, they had the TV, the mass amounts of like automobiles coming out. Back then, you know, it was like a transition, like with automobiles and everything like that. And like vaccines and stuff like that. You know, some of these heinous viruses like smallpox or the measles, people would just die from. But they came up with all these vaccines, and I mean, that's not something I really have to worry about anymore. That's not something that they had to worry about anymore. So it's just like, they don't have a lot of self-reflection. They don't have a lot of like awareness. You know, they're stuck in their own world. This is the way it's been. Like, they think it's still the 90s or something. They think, or the 80s or the 70s. They're still stuck in that time. And they don't realize like how tough it is. It's not just financially tough. Like, it's also communal. And we can sit here and think, oh, you isolate yourself. You're a loser. You know, they'll say this. They'll say, but it's just like, you know, this is pretty normal nowadays. Like, you know, like, we just had a pandemic not too long ago, and people, I said this in a video like one or two, like 2 videos ago. You know, a lot of people I come from a world where people were basically all extroverts, and I was one of the introverts, one of the rarities. This is why I kind of relate with Gen Z with a little bit, because they're a lot introverted. They don't require a lot of social maintenance. I didn't require a lot of social maintenance for all the bullshit I went through when I was younger. And things have changed. We live in a different society, and they don't understand that. They can't recognize that. They're still stuck in this, like, I need to have stuff. I need to showboat. I need to, like, show people, like, and they don't realize, like, you're not in high school no more. You know what I mean? When you get older, like, when you're young, stuff matters to you. Name brand stuff, having the newest car, having this stuff, having that stuff. And then you get to be older, and you're just, if you mature, there's a lot of people in our society that is obviously immature. But when you get to be older, you know, my age and older, which I'm mid-40s, I'm almost pushing 50 in a few years. You start to realize, like, stuff doesn't really have the pizzazz it used to. It really doesn't mean much like it used to, you know, like, you get a brand new car, you get used to it, and then that kind of gets old, and you want to get a new car. It's like it's a continuous thing, keeping up with the Joneses, caring about what people think about you. not accepting like a humble lifestyle. Like you always have to do better. You always have to have more. Enough isn't enough. You gotta, like, that's their mindset. And like where I come from, it's kind of the opposite, where I'm trying to provide a good life for my kids who are men now. They're not kids, they're men. They're grown men. I'm trying to help them provide a good life for, while they build for themselves, and not worry about, hey, listen, I need to have so much saved for myself so I can be independent by myself. You know, I was talking, I'm not going to say who, but I was talking to a boomer one time, and you know, they were surrounded by family, you know what I mean? And it was like, and I understand, like, the environment wasn't, it wasn't the best, but they were like, they wanted to go off on their own. And I was thinking to myself, like, you're almost 70? Like, what do you mean you want to go off on your own? You want to be by yourself? You don't want to be around family? You want to go live your, like, what is that life? This is your life. Like, what exactly do you want to do? You know what I mean? It's like, you've lived your life now, like this, like, you're almost done. You're almost done being here. Like, you should probably care more. And this is the mentality I think a lot of them have. It's just like, fuck my kids. I'm just gonna go do what I want. I'm gonna go on these vacations. I'm gonna go on these cruises. It's just like, but they're not connecting with their kids, and you know what I mean. Like, there's this disconnect with their kids, and I'm not saying like there isn't some type of disconnect with my kids, but I'm there for them. I've apologized to my kids for anything that I've done in the past that, you know, that I've done wrong repeatedly. And I said, hey, listen, the door's open if you need to talk. You know, I have the door open if they need to talk. Because in this environment that we currently live in, nobody gives a shit. I know how it feels to have nobody give a shit about you. And I don't like that for my kids. So I want them to know, as long as I'm around, still breathing, even though I say, oh, like, I don't like, it's just exhaustion, man. I'm just exhausted when I say that stuff. I want better. It's not like I need to be rich, but when I say better, I want a better quality of life. I think that I work hard enough to have a good quality of life. That's why I complain so much on here about economics and like social paradigm that we're currently in this society. But yeah, I want to be there for them. If I didn't give a damn about them, I would just like figure it out on your own. I'm gonna go do my own thing. I could do it. It would probably be easier for me just to go off on my own, take care of myself. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to screw them over. I want them to have a good life. I want them to actually possibly build for their future. We don't know. Here's the thing too with the boomers is they kind of had stability. I mean, it wasn't always stability. Like, they went through their economic turmoil, you know, in the 70s. They went through in like 87, there was some stuff, but they went through their economic turmoil as well, you know. So like, it's not like that these people were just handed everything and everything was hunky-dory. I'm not like, we generalize, like, oh, it's just like your childhood, your life was hard. You had your strife, but compared to ours, I mean, at least, we can sit here and be like, well, you went through economic problems too, but at least you had community, or at least you had support, and that's where it comes down to. And I don't hear anybody talk about that. It's just the lack of support. At least they had support. They had their parents. Not to say that every single one had their parents. They might have had some problems or passed away, but it was really easy to form relationships. So, you could, if you're a guy, you can just go find like they did. They just found somebody else, and the woman would stick with them. The guy wouldn't really have to worry about like we do now. I have to compete with the celebrity in my woman's DMs. I gotta compete with her being on live with all these people. It's a double-edged sword, and they just don't. Here's the thing: is they don't want to listen. All they want to do is like they can't listen, man. They want to sit here and be like, no, this is how it was when it's like, dude, can you not listen? Can you not pay attention? But no, it's got to be about me. Because like they're basically narcissists. You know what I mean? They're really superficial, narcissistic people that haven't grown up. I mean, when you see like, we have a Congress lady. She's a senator or something. She's like 80s and she's got purple hair. You're like, I mean, you can do that, but it's just weird. It's kind of like, just grow up, dude. And this is the generation that has, they worked, they conformed, but they also neglected their kids emotionally. They didn't give a damn about their kids' emotional well-being. Like they would just divorce. And for me, I'm divorced. I've always been in my kids' lives from day one. So I've tried to give them a better experience than I had growing up. Not to say like it was more emotional for me. And like, I always had everything I needed. I had a roof over my head. I didn't have severe trauma where I see my mom getting beat, people being, dying in my life, like this extreme stuff. Then, you know what I mean? But it was a lot of psychological, kind of having to figure things out on my own and not really having leadership, or just trying to find my own way. And it was tough, and it's, it's still, and it's probably going to affect me for the rest of my life, you know what I mean? And you just try to make the best out of it. But they just want to sit here, and when we talk about how expensive it is nowadays, they just want to like blow it off. It's like, dude, can you just not have, do you not have any type of empathy at all? Like, seriously, like, can you not think ahead? A lot of them, if you talk to boomers, they're so gung-ho on their Social Security and their Medicare, but they don't get that it's going, they'll say like, it said it's been running out. Like, hey, listen, man, did you have 40 trillion in debt? Did you have 100 trillion in future liabilities? I think that they robbed the trust, the reserves, and you're going to have to completely rely on the future. And what they don't get too is like, they want to sit here and call people like millennials, Gen Z, lazy and entitled, but like, it's not like we came before them. It's like they're the ones that created this environment anyway. Everybody gets a participation trophy. Like, who caused this environment? Like, you guys are the ones that created this environment. for us to be lazy. That's why you say we're lazy. And I'm not saying that there isn't a lot of Gen Z and millennials that aren't lazy, but it's not like everybody is. It's just like not like every boomer's a bad boomer. There's good boomers out there. They're rare, but there's some good boomers they have some self-awareness. They understand what's happening right now. But it's like they can't, when you try to sit down there, and it's just, it always comes back to them. You know what I mean? It's just like they don't want to take responsibility for, hey, listen, like, you raised us in some type of aspect. You know what I mean? Like, you raised us, or your grandparents, like, you're the one that's disconnected, you know, so you're the one off on your own, like, and you wonder why we are. When you raise kids that you do everything for them, you helicopter over them, and you know, like Gen Z is a perpetuation of the toxicity that the boomers caused. You know what I mean? Like the negative stuff is like they don't want to, and for them too. A lot of them went through a lot of crap with their parents. Not to say that every single like all of their they didn't have any problems with their parents. Like their parents, I think the silent generation, which is untouchable, but I think that they probably didn't know what they were doing. You know, you go from yourself having nothing. Imagine that. You're living through the depression, you're growing up through the depression. You literally have nothing. You're having to skip meals. You're having to go a day without eating. You go through World War II, you come back, all of a sudden there's like, you go from one extreme to the next of this huge economic boom, and you want to give your kids everything you didn't have. And that's what they don't get. Is like, you were spoiled too, man. Do you not understand that? Yeah, okay, we're spoiled. We have things that you didn't have when you were growing up. Well, you had things that your parents didn't have when you were growing up. Like, they literally had nothing. And I don't know, man. It's just, there's a huge war, young people versus old people, and what the boomers don't understand is like, yeah, you got your savings, and yeah, if they hyperinflate the currency, you're not gonna have your savings no more. You know, your home prices are about to drop. You're not gonna be around much longer. You're not going to be around much longer, man. So you might want to enjoy the people in your life. That's what you need to think about. Instead of fighting and being like, you're late, why don't you contribute? You probably wouldn't have to worry about savings and living on your own if you got all of that materialistic crap out of your head and realize, like, man, I only have a couple years left. Maybe people in my life are more important than things and vacations. There are things I can leave. I have some wisdom. Maybe there is some wisdom I can drop. Not to say, listen, boomers, I'm not taking any of their advice. I don't really care about what they have to say, but they might have a little bit of wisdom you know what I mean? They might have a little bit of like, yeah, like this is how But things are different now, you know. A little self reflection instead of sitting watching your same old shows like it's the 50s or whatever you're doing, and thinking like, man, like maybe I should try to repair some of these relationships. What did I do wrong? Why are my kids so distant? Do I know my grandkids? Have I really contributed as much as I could to my grandkids? Nah, they don't think like that. And it's a sad existence. And it's really sad that a lot of them might pass on like they never had kids.